Hello, BookTube. Well, it's a bleak and barren Sunday here at Hyde Cottage. I know that I have said that many times before. That's my code word for the day when I get no books in the mail. And today is less bleak and barren than usual because I got my new Kindle in the mail, and that is going to give me access to a great number of books. But usually I console myself with a tag, so even though I got my Kindle, it still feels right to do a tag. And I have one. That's just the kind of nosy poke around in the medicine cabinet tag that I love. It's 50 questions you've never been asked tag, which I saw on the restricted section. They didn't tag me, but I want to do these myself. And since it's 50 questions, we'll try to be expeditious here. Question number 1, what's your favorite candle scent? Teenage weightlifter. Question number 2, which female celebrity do you wish were your sister? I'm Boston Irish Catholic. I don't want any more relatives. Question number 3, which male celebrity do you wish were your brother? Ditto. Question number 4, how old do you think you'll be when you get married? 5 times to Deb was plenty. Thank you. Question number 5, do you know someone who is a hoarder? Yes. Yes, I do. Question number 6, can you do the splits? Unless this refers to the seat of a pair of pants, I'm guessing no. Question number 7, how old were you when you learned to ride a bike? I don't actually know. I never enjoyed it, but I did learn. I do know how to do it. And I didn't enjoy it as a kid. I came to enjoy it as an adult. I did an enormous amount of biking in the American Midwest and loved it. Question number 8, how many oceans have you swum in? None. I have been to all of them, if we count the Indian Ocean, the Antarctic Ocean, the Pacific, the Atlantic. I have been to all of them. I have waded up to my shins in all of them. But only a lunatic would go swimming in an ocean. Sharks live in oceans. And you're bobbing around like food at the surface. Why would you do that? Why? Why would you do that? That's insane. When you have a choice not to, that's insane. So no, only a fool would dive into the ocean and swim around on the surface. So I've never done that. Question number 9. How many countries have you visited? I originally, when I was looking at this tag, tried to count them up, but I got tangled up in technicalities. As I mentioned the other day, I've visited countries that don't exist anymore. Quite a few of you, if you're of a certain age, some of you anyway, maybe not quite a few, but some of you will have visited the Soviet Union. That's not a country anymore. And same thing is true for me in especially Africa, where I have been to countries that don't exist under their own name, their own organization anymore. And there are countries I haven't been to. I'm as a number, I'm going to guess maybe 180. Something like that, but give or take some that I couldn't visit, nor could anybody anymore. Question number 10, is anyone in your family in the army? No. Question number 11, what would you name your daughter if you had one? Brandine. Question number 13, what would you name your son if you had one? Rudiger. Question number 13, what's the worst grade you got on a test? I got, once upon a time, an F in biology because a large part of the grade depended on dissecting a frog, and I wouldn't do it. I was told, this is the course, and the course is this. If you don't do this, then you get an F. And I said, fine, I get an F. Question number 14, what was your favorite TV show as a kid? The Adventures of Superman. Yes, Superman, who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend steel in his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. Question number 15. What did you dress up as on Halloween when you were 8? Halloween was not yet a holiday when I was 8. Okay? Number 16. Have you read any Harry Potter, Hunger Games, or Twilight? I have read the first 3 Harry Potter and mean to get around to the rest of them. I read the very first Hunger Games book, and I've read all of Twilight. I just couldn't stop reading Twilight. It was like watching a train wreck. I couldn't stop reading. Question number 17. Would you Would you rather have an American or a British accent? I would rather have an American accent. Thank you. Question number 18. Did your mother go to university? No. Me Sainted Ma stayed in the kitchen boiling potatoes, as God intended. Question number 19. Are your grandparents still married? I suppose somewhere deep in hell. Yes. Question number 20. Have you ever taken karate lessons? No. I took kendo for a very long time, but never karate. Question number 21. Do you know who Kermit the Frog is? Question number 22. What's the first amusement park that you visited? I think it was in Iowa, and I was fairly young, but I was still old enough to know that it's not a good place to visit, that you'd rather be anywhere else than someplace full of hazardous machinery built by the cheapest laborers while drunk, and who do the building while drunk for the very lowest amount of money in an open field next to town, so that you don't even have to speculate. You can see that they're bobbing and weaving their way to the Porta-Johny in between building a Ferris wheel to which you are going to commit your life. So I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I guarantee you it was involuntary and always has been ever since. Question number 23. What language would you like to be fluent in? For me, that would be Japanese. Question number 24. Do you spell the word gray with an A or gray with an E? I like it with an E, and I never know what's acceptable and what's not. I usually just go, I hate to say it because it's such a 21st century answer, but I usually just go with whatever the spell prompt on whatever machine I'm using says. Question number 25. Is your father bald? My father is not only bald, he's a bare, bleached, worm-eaten skull. Question number 26. Do you know triplets? Well, if they're identical triplets, then I'm not sure how I would know that I would know them, but I don't think I do. No. Question number 27. Do you prefer Titanic or Notebook? Meaning the two movies, I assume, and not the two books. Because Titanic wasn't built from any one... The James Cameron Titanic wasn't built from any one particular text, as far as I know. But if it means the movies, I have no idea what the question is implying here. They aren't anywhere close to the same. I might have my problems with the director and the star, but Titanic is a very good piece of work. The Notebook is fluff and brainless. I don't think they're the same at all. For me, it would be the Titanic. Question number 28. Have you ever had Indian food? Yes, I have had Indian food, including in Singapore, where the Indian food is just called food. Question number 29. What's the name of your favorite restaurant? There's a bit of a problem here, because my favorite restaurant doesn't have a name. It's just a little door on a street in Chinatown here in Boston. Just go in, and there's a counter, and I guess technically it's a restaurant, but they don't have a name. They don't have a menu. Almost nobody ever goes in there who's white, except for me. So I can't really answer, although I do have a favorite restaurant. Question number 30. Have you ever been to Nando's? Never. Question number 31. Do you belong to any warehouse stores? No, I don't. I've been to some of them, and they are wondrous. But the one thing that's needed to belong to a warehouse store is a car. And I not only don't have a car, I've never driven a car, I've never sat behind the wheel of a car in my life. So I without an ability to take away the warehouse items that you buy in bulk, there's no point in belonging to one, so I don't. But I love visiting them. Question number 32. What would your parents have named you if you'd been the opposite gender? Kind of gross. I'm sure they never thought of it. Question number 33. What is your nickname? Dog Boy. Alas. Always has been. Always will be. All it takes, if you don't call me that, all it takes when you're walking down the street with me is for us to walk past the yard where a 200-pound Rottweiler comes rushing to the gate and slams his face against the chain link to try and kill you, and you take a step back and say, oh my God, do you think you can clear that fence? And I take a step forward, walk over and smooch his face while he's growling at you. That's all it'll take for you to start using that nickname too. Question number 34. Who's your favorite person in the world? Nathan James. Oh, favorite person. Oh, awkward. Let's just move on, shall we? Question number 35. Would you rather live in the country or the city? I've done both. The city, for me. Or rather, an outlying district of a city, like where I live now, where I'm within easy striking distance of anything I want in person. But I'm also out away from the congestion of buildings and all that sort of stuff. And once upon a time, until just comparatively recently, I was also away from the noise. The noise has now come to me. So I either need to move further out or I need to move away. But once upon a time, this was just greenery. And that was nice. But the countryside, nice to visit. Wouldn't want to live there. Have lived there. And there are no bookstores. There's no 24-hour takeout. There's no... let's see here. Question number 36. Can you whistle? I have buck teeth and a 1-inch overbite, so I can't whistle. No. Question number 37. Do you sleep with a nightlight? Okay, A, I barely sleep at all, and B, when I do, it's very involuntary. So I turn off the lights, and that's it. And I'm just hoping that it's over soon. So nightlight, no, no. And haven't I read studies that nightlights are bad for your sleeping? If you're a normal human who sleeps, 9 solid hours out of every 24, God help us. Haven't I read that the key to good sleep is not only a low temperature in the room and not only a regular routine of sleeping, but also as close to complete darkness as you can get. So even blackout blinds on windows. I can swear I've read that or seen it online. So a nightlight, I'm not really sure. Question number 38. Do you eat breakfast every morning? I do not. I read in the morning, and I write in the morning. I do the overnight emails in the morning. I walk the dog in the morning, sort of lounge around in the morning, just a little, as I sort of gradually think about what I'm going to do that day. So in terms of the time on the clock, I do have a first meal every day, but it's around noon. So I wouldn't call it breakfast. I certainly don't eat first thing in the morning. I don't know how anybody does that. I don't have the slightest inclination to do that. Question number 39. Do you take any daily pills or medication? No. Question number 40. What medical condition do you have? I love how the question just assumes you have one. And I was thinking about this. I've had one or two in my life. But in terms of something that's stuck with me, I think the only thing that would qualify now is neuropathy. Just lingering peripheral nerve system damage caused by, well, any number of things can cause it. I have a fairly odd, a little bit rare, and a fairly fortunate kind of neuropathy. Most people who have neuropathy suffer from it. It's active pain, pins and needles, sticking, stabbing pain that's intermittent, but that never quite goes away. Mine is the obverse of that, which is a lack of sensation. I have a very poor sense of touch, which I, all in all, prefer to the other. Question number 41. How many times have you been to the hospital? I honestly couldn't count. Question number 42. Have you ever seen Finding Nemo? I have. I don't understand why it is fetishized quite so much by the people who live and die by it, but I thought it was charming in its way. Question number 43. Where do you buy your jeans? I don't buy my jeans. I'm 1,000,000 years old. I'm a fat old Irish Catholic. I get them the way God intended. I hang around the dumpster behind the men's alcoholic shelter. Every once in a while, somebody goes in one of those places that can't be helped. And their stuff is thrown away when it's still relatively good. Question number 44. What's the last compliment you got? I almost never get compliments. Almost nobody ever compliments me. I think because I'm a loudmouth egomaniac. That could be it. I think probably the last thing that even remotely qualifies as a compliment was an editor of mine who said that she needed copy overnight and that she was going to be really busy with another aspect of the same project. So she was asking me because, as she put it, I don't want to have to read it over. Meaning that she knew it would be clean, that she knew she wouldn't be able to do anything to it when I gave it to her, and wouldn't need to do anything to it. And I'm taking that as a compliment. It could easily be seen as an insult. It could be that she was saying, I don't want to read your work. One way or another. I would absolutely love it if you could all compliment me in the comments field. Nobody ever compliments me. Question number 45. Do you usually remember your dreams in the morning? I do. I usually remember my dreams in the morning, and it absolutely fascinates me. Dreams just in general fascinate me because they come from something. They come from some kernel in your mind, and you don't have any control over what's going to spin out from which kernel and in what direction. That's what I love most about dreams, is that they are completely involuntary, sometimes elaborate thought. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. I love remembering them in the morning because my first question for myself is, okay, aside from, the flying elephants or the purple sidewalks or whatever, what was that dream actually about? What was it actually about? Not the plot of the dream, but what kind of a dream was it? Was it happy? Was it anxious? And if it was anxious, what kind of anxious? What was the concentration? That's what I try to do to understand why I had that dream, is what was it about? And often, in myself and in other people, that has often given me great insight. Dreams can give you great insight into something that you didn't realize was preying on your mind to the extent that it was. That's a great way to learn what's preying on your mind, even though if you think you know it perfectly well. I just wish I remembered them in vivid detail longer than the morning. Like most people, I forget my dreams almost right away. I tried briefly for a time writing them down. It wasn't the same. I wish I could actively remember them. And I think there must be a very good neurological reason why we don't. I don't think they're meant to be remembered. But boy, oh boy, I love it. Unless it's really bad, but even when it's really bad, I don't love it that morning when you wake up from a really bad dream, something horrible. For me, in my case, it would be grief. It's usually grief. At the moment, that morning, it feels terrible. But in the afternoon, you're over the emotional shock of it, and you can think back on it, and then it's fascinating all over again. So I do remember them in the morning, and I wish there were a way for me to remember them actively after that, but they fade away. Question number 46. What flavor tea do you enjoy? None. Question number 47. How many pairs of shoes do you currently own? 2. I have a pair of work boots that I bought probably 30 years ago. They were so solid at the time that they have never worn out nor even started to. And I used them for clomping around and for when it was snowing and sleeting. They have great traction. And then I have another pair of shoes. I have my ordinary, everyday pair of shoes. And I need to replace them. It feels like I'm walking barefoot when I walk in them. And if you turn them over, you can see the soles are almost gone. And they were dirt cheap, so there's no sense in getting them repaired. I need to replace them. I really need to do that, and I haven't done it. Shoes are always the thing where I hold off until I've got actual holes, until my actual stocking foot is touching the ground while I'm walking. I wait that long all the time, and I don't know why. It's so painless to buy a pair of shoes. I don't know why I wait. And also, in addition to those 2 pairs of shoes, with the clomping boots, I'm hoping that eventually Boston will get to at least a couple of months of weather where I won't need snow boots. And I'll be able to just put them away. Then I'll have 1 pair. And in addition to a new pair of those everyday walking around shoes, I also need a pair of sandals. I had a pair of sandals at the beginning of the autumn that had lasted for 2 years, and they had holes in the bottom, and they had things flopping off them. And I kept telling myself, this summer, you'll absolutely replace them. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, you say that, but you'll find a way to get through the whole summer on these things, even though they're barely held together at all. And then I got Frida, and she ate those sandals. They are gone. So I don't have any sandals now. So if it ever does warm up here in Boston, it's freezing cold here now. But if it ever does warm up, I'm going to need to get both. And I'll just there's a discount shoe store in downtown Boston that is always running sales. Buy one, get the second half price. Buy one, get the second free. And I'm going to need 2 pairs of pants. 2 pairs of shoes. I'll just go in and do that. Question number 48. What religion would you raise your children to practice? None. Religion is a conviction. You make a conviction. You give yourself to your religion. You make a conviction. Children can't do that. Telling them to do that is child abuse. Plain and simple. I know there are some new atheist internet pundits who've said that and got a lot of flack for it, and had to walk it back. But I don't walk things back. Inculcating a child into a belief system that should require their considered conviction just because you want them to say it when they're 8 is an abuse of your privilege as a parent. You shouldn't do it. If you believe that your faith has a true calling on people, then you should have confidence that it will call to them when they're 12 or 18 or 20. And if it doesn't, that's not your fault, but it's not their fault either. But I got a kick out of the fact that that is question number 48. What religion would you raise your children to practice? And question number 49 is, how old were you when you found out that Santa wasn't real? That's the very next question. The question assumes that for a while in childhood you believed that a fat man in a red suit showed up at your house on Christmas Eve, came down the chimney, which your house didn't have, and delivered presents to you that he only learned you wanted through mental telepathy. And that he managed to do this for every house in the entire Christian world in one night, in a sleigh driven by reindeer. The question assumes that as a child you actually believed that was true, and that at some point you came to realize that obviously it was not true. The question assumes that at some point you came obviously to believe that that was not true, and now you don't. Now the question is just asking you, when did that happen? But it doesn't ask you that about the first. The question immediately before it. So a fat man in a red suit who drives a sleigh pulled by reindeer and visits children to give them telepathic gift presents on Christmas Eve down their chimney, well, that you obviously don't believe, and the question wants to know when you stopped believing it. But an all-knowing, all-benevolent, invisible man who has a legion of invisible emissaries who have wings and who oversees every single minute of your life and every thought that you have in it, and who sent his son, who was an incarnation of himself, to come to earth, be human, get crucified, and absolve you from sins that he inflicted you with in the first place, so that you, not your body and not your mind, but some other part of you, some mirror representation of you that no one's ever been able to find, can go to a paradise where you will always be 28 and get to have fun and talk with all of your dead relatives and your dead friends and your dead pets forever. That you are supposed to believe. So the one, well, obviously the question is, when did you learn that that wasn't true? When did you, sooner? Of course you don't believe that now. But the other one, okay, you're still in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and you are supposed to believe it. They are exactly the same. They are both obviously unbelievable. So, needless to say, I not only don't understand either of these questions at their heart, but I very much don't understand why they're right next to each other. I would either very much want to talk with the person who originally made this tag, or I'd want to stay as far away from them as possible. But how old was I when I first learned that Santa wasn't real? I don't even remember. I remember my parents telling the kids, you have to go to bed and you have to be nice and quiet because Santa is going to visit. I knew who Santa was. And the next morning, the very first question that I asked my dogs was, did anyone visit this house overnight? And they said, no, of course not. No hint of a trace. And not only that, but if someone had been in the living room with you here in the bed with us, we'd have cried bloody murder. We wouldn't have let a stranger anywhere near you. They said, no, obviously not. No, there was no one here overnight. I got a little older, got communication a little more refined with them. Still the Santa stories going on. Instead of asking them, was anyone here overnight, I would say, who was in the living room overnight? And they would immediately walk over to my father, and he'd say, why'd you send your dogs over to me? And I'd say, oh, no problem. No special reason. I would say, was anyone in the living room overnight? And they'd go immediately to the person who was. So, no, I don't remember when it was, but I was never in any real doubt that the house was being visited by a hominid, an alien visitor. I had a kind of warning system set up. I couldn't have been fooled. Question number 50, why do you have a blog? I think these originally came from the blogosphere. And it's a bit of a melancholy question for me, because once upon a time, for a long time, for 10 years, I did have a blog, Steve Reads. that was first a thing on its own on Blogspot, and then moved to Open Letters Monthly, the literary journal that I helped to found and where I was the managing editor. And it was just one of our on-site blogs. And when Open Letters died, Steve Reeds died with it. And I was so busy concentrating on continuing some aspect of the spirit and the personnel of Open Letters Monthly into Open Letters Review that I didn't really think about Steve Reeds. And now that Open Letters Review is sort of on its own feet, sort of working fairly well, in fact, better than we originally anticipated, I'm starting now to think, well, okay, you stopped Steve Reeds, but it had a long lifespan and you enjoyed it. Maybe you should continue it. And so I'm starting to wonder, how I should do that and where I should do that, and all sorts of things like that. So why did I have a blog was to have a totally informal conversational space for writing about books that isn't quite as formal as book reviews. And that's what I did it for, and I loved it for that. And I don't have that release anymore except my journal. But there's a particular kind of blogging pleasure in doing that for the public that I loved. So that's why I started it, and that's why I will restart it once I figure out exactly what I want to do. And that's it. That is the 50 questions you've never been asked tag with plenty of diversions and rants. That was a lot of fun. So I want to tag people, but I want to tag everybody, because this is just the kind of, if I tag a few people, I'm going to seem like I'm singling them out, when this is exactly the kind of tag that I like to hear. This is the kind of personal life history tag that I love just listening to. I could listen to all of them. So all of you who are watching this, I want you to do this tag. I don't think I've seen anybody that I watch regularly do this. And these are great questions. So, so as cheesy as it is, as much of a punt as it always is characterized on BookTube, I tag you if you're watching this. Do this tag. This is a lot of fun. And I'll leave a link to the restricted sections, because I think they listed the questions, and I'll try to list the questions too. But anyway, that did beguile half an hour of my bleak and barren Sunday. So I'm going to sign off for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.